So the last thing in this section is some word problems that are about some modeling with mathematics activities. So here's an example. You are planning an awards banquet for your school. You need to rent tables to seat 180 people. Tables come in two sizes. Small tables seat 6 people and large tables seat 10 people. The equation 6x plus 10y equals 180 models this situation where x is the number of small tables and y is the number of large tables. So they want us to graph the equation and interpret the intercepts. So what we will be doing is first finding your x and y intercepts for this problem and then using that to graph it. So the equation is 6x plus 10y equals 180. And we're going to be finding two things, the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So when you are on the x-axis, you don't move up or down anything. So when you're on the x-axis, the y becomes 0. So when we are trying to find the x-intercept for this problem, what we will do is we will take the equation and turn y to be 0. So when we're finding the x-intercept, you can almost just cover whatever the y says and just write what's left, which is 6x equals 180. When you're finding the x-intercept, you should have the x variable in your equation. You get rid of the other one, put your hand over it, and just let it go away because when you multiply by 0, since you've replaced 0 in for y, that whole term goes away, and you're only going to be left with the 6x and then the equals 180. Vice versa, when you find the y-intercept, you cover over the x, so you cover over the 6x, and you would write what's left, which is 10y equals 180. And then you would solve both of these little equations, which will just require you to divide. So the first one, we're going to be doing 180 divided by 6. And that's going to tell me where this graph will cross the x-axis. And where will that be? 180 divided by 6.
30.
Yep. And then for the y-intercept, when we solve this equation, we would just divide by 10. And 180 divided by 10, 18. So we know that this line crosses the x-axis at 30 and the y-axis at 18. So if we were going to use these things to graph it, and we have a graph here, this graph is only showing the first quadrant. So this is like your y-axis. And this is your x-axis. And we know that I need to make a point at 30 for x, and I need to make a point at 18 for y. I don't think I'll be able to just count all the way to 30, so we might want to label this a little bit differently so we don't have to do that. So instead of going by ones, we need to make sure that the x-axis goes to at least 30. What would you guys like to go by? What would make sense? 5 is good. So if we go by 5s, this would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. And on that x-axis, which we should also label, x is the number of small tables. On the x-axis, since the x-intercept is 30, that means that we would plot the point at 30, 0. So right here is where we would plot the point. The number of small tables is 30 for the x-intercept. And then vice versa, for the y-intercept, we should label the y-axis. The y is the number of large tables. And we need to go up to 18. Since 18 is even, and I don't want to go by 5s and then estimate it, I'm going to go by 2s. Yeah, that'll work. 2s or 3s. And then once I get to 18, I would make my point there at 0, 18. And that's because y-intercepts have 0 in for x. So you plot that point 0, 18. Once you have your x and y intercept to graph, then you would just connect the 2 points. In this case, only the first quadrant is seen. So yesterday I told you how when I want you to graph, I want you to have the arrows continue on in both directions. But technically this graph stops here because none of the negative numbers make sense for this graph. So this graph actually does stop right here and right here. And that's because you can't have a negative number of small tables or a negative number of large tables. So the second quadrant, the third quadrant, and the fourth quadrant don't make any sense for this problem because it's about a real-world situation and you can't have a negative number of tables. So that's why only the first quadrant is given. Whenever you're given a graph and you're supposed to graph this thing completely on your own, you will have to figure out the scale, what to go by. We chose to go by 5s for the x after we just found out what the x-intercept is. Like if we found out the x-intercept was 50, maybe we would go by something different. Or if we found out it was 500, we would definitely go by something different. So the first thing you should do is take the equation they give you, find the x and y intercepts. Then that will help you decide what to go by for your x and y axis. Then you plot the points and connect the points. And then that's it. So what I want you guys to do, there's one problem that's just like this. So the next problem here on the next page, it says you decide to rent tables from a different company. This situation can be modeled by the equation 4x plus 6y equals 180. Again, x is the number of small tables and y is the number of large tables. I want you to graph the equation using x and y intercepts. So same type of situation. I'll give you maybe like 5 minutes. Let you try this one on your own, and then we'll go over it together. I'm already watching what students are doing. Some of us are already labeling the graph with the x and y axis, and that's so awesome. Some of us are already going to find x and y intercepts. So however it makes sense to you, wherever you would like to start is fine. 5 minutes, we'll come back together and go over it.
Totally okay. And 45. go by? Like what numbers? 5. I want 5, 10, 15, 20. And then 2. I mean, I got 20. Actually, the doctor's right now because I'm going to do it. Like, I just sat down in my camera and I was thinking about where did you leave her? She's in the room. It's just so upsetting. Actually, never leave. Oh. I just couldn't find it. But I'm ready.
All right, let's go over the answer for this problem. So, first thing, let's do 4x plus 6y equals 180. So, okay, because it won't all fit here, I scrolled down. Here's the equation that we were using. And again, what does the x-axis represent? We're going to go over these. What does the x-axis represent? Perfect. And then the other one will be the large tables. I'm just going to go ahead and put this on here now. Okay. And then to graph this, we would easily be able to find the x and y intercepts, and then we could figure out what to go by, what to plot, and then connect those 2 points. So when we're finding the x-intercept, at this point, I hope that you're feeling pretty confident and that it's pretty easy. Oh, Connor's joining us.
Yes.
Hello, Connor. Hopefully you are getting the hang of this, and all you have to do is cover up the other variable. So you're going to be solving the equation 4x equals 180. And then once you do that, it should take one step. You just divide by 4, and what's the x-intercept going to be?
45.
Perfect. And then for the y-intercept, you do the opposite. So you cover up the 4x, and you just write down the 6y equals 180. And then you solve that by dividing by 6, and what do we get for the y-intercept? 30. So that means that we would plot the point 45, 0 on the graph because the x-intercept, y is always 0, which is why we cover it over and we don't use it. And then vice versa, the y-intercept will be 0, 30. So when we go to the graph to then graph these, I would have to figure out what to go by. This bottom left-hand corner is always going to be 0, so we have to make sure that we go at least to 45 for x and at least 30 for y. I feel like both of these make sense to go by 5s. So I'll just do 5s for both. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Oh, this is going to take forever. Okay, so I go by 5s. Here's 45. And then 30 here. I connect my 2 points. And there's my graph. The last thing that this asks us to do that I forgot to go over with the first question is it says interpret the intercepts. That means what does this number mean and what does this number mean? So the number for, let's look at the x-axis here, the x-intercept. For this equation, remember, this equation represents the number of small tables and the number of large tables that you can rent for the party. So the x-intercept says x equals 45 when y equals 0. What does this ordered pair represent? If x is the number of small tables and y is the number of large tables, what does 45, 0 represent? Anyone? Well, x is the number of small tables, so this point here would represent you can get 45 small tables and rent 0 large. All right, so that to get all the tables you would need, you could do that and that. Or what does this one represent?
You can get 30 large tables and 0 small ones.
Perfect. Thank you. Or you could do 0 small tables and 30 large. You also could do anything on this line either, but these are just your x and y intercepts. But anything that lies on this line would be another combination of small and large tables you could rent for the party.